welcome to Passion. I'm your host, Britt Ivy, and today with us we have author and speaker, Mrs. Lezlie Winberry. Welcome, Lezlie.
Thank you.
Yeah, glad
it's a
you're here
pleasure to
today.
be here.
You had quite a drive getting here. I appreciate you coming out of state to share about your passion for the unborn and your passion for being a speaker now that this is a new life adventure for you.
Yes.
Why don't you share a little bit about how your transition from being a teacher to being a speaker has evolved?
I think the fact that I taught and have taught, but also because of what I've gone through with my life experience, it helped me to start writing about it. And from there, I was asked to also speak about it. I became involved with my own local crisis pregnancy center in the 80s and had some opportunity then to share different aspects of my story.
Wonderful. I understand you wrote a book about your story as well. I know that you were here speaking to our audience about When I Cried Out on a previous show, and that really launched this topic. You brought your book. In a minute we'll hold that up and we can pull in for a close-up of that. But I know that launched your passion to want to actually speak about it to help other women. It sounds like that is actually happening now that you're going to be retiring from teaching.
Correct.
Great.
I also realized that I was involved with my CareNet Pregnancy Center before my daughter, who passed away before she was 2. Going through the counseling there at my CareNet Pregnancy Center prepared me for the grief that I would then go through on losing my daughter to cancer. I usually tell people I have 2 children in heaven. One of them is there because of a disease, my daughter Cassandra. But my first child is also in heaven because of a choice that I made in the late 70s.
Wonderful. Well, I've got, they'll be meeting a child of mine in heaven as well. So I know that we both have a passion for the unborn because we want to educate people, not ever to shame people for a choice that the world tells you is really no problem, and that there are no after effects, no side effects. And I know you've referenced this before, and it really helped me explain it to those that don't understand, which is PTSD. How many people have heard of PTSD? Well, you ask that in an audience, in a room full of people, and almost every hand goes up. People have heard of post-traumatic stress disorder. And you can share with the audience a little bit about your son and his experience with that. But that's a real disease, real side effects. And of course that was happening as a result of war for years before it was documented. And now we know that PAS, post-abortion syndrome, is something that affects millions of people out there walking around, and they don't know why their lives aren't working, because they're told there's no problem and there are no after effects. Well, I can tell you there are after effects, and they read like a pamphlet I read that changed my life at one point when it was handed to me. And it said, do you suffer from suicidal tendencies, addictions, picking abusive relationships, eating disorders? And I looked at this and I thought, my goodness, they know me.
Yes.
So it was a life-changing moment for me. So this is a real syndrome, and 55 million babies have gone to heaven early since 1973, and that's 55 million women and men that suffer from these consequences and don't understand why. So there's no, I know this is your heart, and I'll turn it to you now. Your heart is also not to shame or belittle someone for a choice that just they weren't educated about. But why don't you go ahead and share your heart for that? Because when I found out about this, it was like puzzle pieces falling into place. And I know we both want to share the education with women because there is healing. There is freedom.
Yes. For me, when I went in to have my abortion, I was told about all the clinical things to look out for. And I didn't have any physical problems afterwards. What I wasn't told about were the emotional. The main thing I struggled with was anxiety attacks. I would often wake up in the morning early and I would hear my husband getting ready for work, but I would be paralyzed and I wouldn't be able to get up. And because of that, I felt like I was going to have a heart attack or suffocate from it.
Stress.
Stress related to that, depression, as you mentioned. I think of my youngest son, Michael, who went to Afghanistan and he came back with PTSD. It reminded me of our neighbor who had been a Vietnam vet. We didn't understand so much about PTSD and what our neighbor was going through and why he couldn't handle music being played on a Sunday afternoon in our garage, even with the door down.
Oh my.
When we're educated, we can get rid of fear. We can face the facts. We can move on in our life with what needs to be dealt with. Not everyone will suffer with the same symptoms.
Right.
And not everybody will suffer for the same amount of time, just like with grief, there are different stages of grief.
Correct.
Today, my heart is for men and women to understand that they might experience some of these things, that there is help. I received that help through my volunteering at my local CareNet Pregnancy Center. It might be through talking to a family counselor and just mentioning what's going on. And as you said, there is no shame in it. When we speak forth about it, it breaks off that shame and that secrecy.
I really love how you put that, because it really is starting the path to healing and forgiveness and celebrating freedom and stopping, which post means to stop, stopping the unknown, the secrets, and the shame. And that, I know, is your heart in a big way. So at the Pregnancy Center, we have offered free ultrasounds for years. And just this past year, we have instigated, we fundraised for a project called the Mobile Medical Unit, which is basically a very expensive Mercedes Stryker bus outfitted in leather with a nurse's station and a bathroom and an ultrasound machine. And it's portable, and we offer free ultrasounds anywhere. It's the first bus in the state. The first one was actually in Huntington Beach, California. Now they're across the nation. But it's just beautiful to be able to offer that. And I know for myself, if I had seen one ultrasound, I would have biological children today.
Yes. There's so much we have learned. I know that one thing that helps a lot of women and men who made the choice to terminate, to go back and perhaps name their child. Now, I say that that helps a lot. I struggled at times, well, did I need to do that? For me, that wasn't one of those things to help me through. For me, it's been writing and sharing. There was a time about 10 or 15 years ago where even in the churches, the sharing about abortion and talking about the symptoms was out in the open. And like a lot of things, sometimes we go through waves where we discuss it and then we kind of forget about it, but then something else comes along. And I believe that this is one of those times when it needs to be talked about again. It's not that men and women are not experiencing and making the choice to stop something. I think of even a tumor that grows in your body. It's a live entity that's doing something. And when you put a stop to it, it affects you in one way or another, usually a positive way, but you're still going through symptoms of putting a stop to something.
Oh my, I agree. It's a topic that's heavy. It's not the easiest topic to discuss. And I really admire you for coming on Passion and speaking with me about this. And I know people ask me, you know, did you just decide one day to wake up and share the guts of your life, you know, for the world? And the answer is no. But I've met enough people that are suffering and they do not make the connection of some choice that was made 10, 20, 30, 40 years ago. I've met 85-year-old women. They're afraid to mention it to their husbands because they think they'll, you know, it was a different stigma at that time. So it's been through waves of different stigmas over the years. And I'm going to just turn to you for a minute and ask you about your book, When I Cried Out. Just a brief synopsis of what is the main message of that book that you want to get out to your audiences, because it must have been, it was a healing tool to write it. I'm sure it brought up pain as well. And we have about 8 minutes. So if you would go ahead and share your heart for that, I'd love the audience to know about When I Cried Out. Lezlie Winberry.
Thank you. When I Cried Out actually comes from a verse that I started singing. I had read it in Psalms 138:5, and a melody came to me. In the day when I cried out, you answered me and made me bold with strength in my soul. We found out that my daughter was sick when she was 8 months old. This book is not about how to go through the grieving, but it's about growing through. And the people that came into our life that helped us to get through that.
So growing
through it.
Rather than white knuckling through it.
Correct.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay.
And it's about how God just opened up the doors and taught me how to ask for help. Just like sharing this story for people who have lost a child in whatever form it could be, it has helped me to share my testimony also with my abortion. I remember, as you said, talking to an 80-year-old woman. I was the first person that she had ever shared that with, and how that lifted so much off of her. When we share our stories, in whatever the loss might be, we open up the door for others who are just waiting. They're just waiting for somebody to ask them about it. I remember in the years that followed after my daughter died, wondering, do I tell people or don't I tell people? And I think it depends on the opportunity. But I've realized, even though it's been almost 27 years now, there are still people who are losing their children. They are losing their parents. They are losing their siblings. They need to be able to talk about it. When we open up that door to our own story, our own loss, and we have hope for them, it helps in their healing.
I agree. You mentioned grief. I know when I went through a grief workshop, it was actually called Winter Spring. It was local. I know they're countrywide. It was explained to me that grief is like a wave. You're standing on the edge of the ocean and you're wading out a little bit, and the wave comes in and it knocks you down. And you stand up, wade a little further, it knocks you down. You stand up. So when I was grieving my father's death, and I know people were grieving all sorts of things in that workshop. People that had lost their children, people that to trauma, people that had lost their children to violent crimes, people that had lost their parents to old age, people that had gone through an abortion, all different kinds. Grief is grief. And it triggers different things in the human personality, just like you were talking about PTSD and your neighbor who was so shell-shocked, so traumatized, a little bit of noise, you know, just set him off. Like me earlier today, you know, showing up at the studio and there's like 8 extra people and I'm, oh my gosh, what, you know, as silly as that may sound, it's it's interesting to cope with those things. So I know our heart is to direct people, which it's on the screen for a helpline. We also have a national across America helpline that they can put the graphics up at any time in the studio that people can call if they want to talk to somebody. Because the world really tells you, hey, there's no problem, there's no issue. So the loss of the connection of that, I know that for a lot of people that see this, they'll be able to feel like, oh my gosh, I'm not crazy. Oh my gosh, maybe that has something to do with it. And just move on and love yourself, you know?
Right. I find that when I know something, the facts about something, when I experience depression, I will say to myself, I'm feeling depressed. And just speaking that out, I have, in a sense, busted that.
Right.
And it no longer has the hold and control over me.
Right.
When my son, as a vet, came home, he is now plugged into different groups that have helped him with his PTSD. Part of what we want to do today through CareNet pregnancy centers across America is to let men and women know that there are groups, there is help. There are people in their life who have gone through the same thing that they have. And talking about it helps to bring it out to the light, into the light.
And many of those are named Forgiven and Set Free. I know the class I took was Forgiven and Set Free. And it's amazing because on one hand you feel like, well, there's no problem, so I don't need to be forgiven of anything. On the other hand, there can be an underlying guilt, even if you tell yourself there's not. So it's just wonderful. Trauma is trauma, you know, be it at war or a sudden loss of something that, you know, you didn't even really know was a part of you. It's all grief.
The thing I love too is I remember when I spoke one time and a woman came up to me afterwards and asked me how I could share my story without crying. And it took me back for a minute. And then I thought about how the scars on your hand, in the hands of Jesus, the nails, that the scars are still there, but the soreness is not there. The infection is not there.
The evidence of what you went through is there, but not the pain and trauma.
Correct. And that's a sign of healing.
Mm-hmm. I like also how you mentioned when you tell on yourself with the depression or whatever it is, that is a very helpful tool that it took a long time for me to learn. You know, you narc on yourself with the, okay, I'm feeling sad, instead of, you know, the world tells you, don't put on a happy face, you know, and I did that for so many years. And just feeling and processing and moving through things, it really leads to a different level of freedom, freedom in life, where you don't have to keep pushing things down or take something to numb the pain or what have you. So thank you for sharing all that, Lezlie.
Yes, thank you.
It's amazing. All right, well, we do hope to help and inspire people to reach out for help. And the local hotline is 541-772-1921. And of course, across America, there's a National Pregnancy Center hotline that we can go ahead and play that lower third again. That is also accompanied by the web address there. That is the pregnancycenter.us is the local, and the one on top there is the national. So we've got about a minute left. I'm very excited about our adventures in front of us as speakers, and I'm very grateful to call you a friend.
Thanks.
And is there anything you'd like to leave the audience with in this last minute?
We talked about post-abortion syndrome and how we want to rename it as a positive.
We can say it in unison. Positive acceptance, success. There you go.
And we can have that success. What has been in the past is something that no longer needs to be with us on a daily basis. So we hope to expose that, to get the secret out there. to let women, men and women know that
Shine it.
they can go through and name this and continue on and heal from it.
If you see it, you can free it. All
Yes.
right. Well, thank you, Lezlie Winberry. And thank you very much for joining us today on Passion. We look forward to seeing you again soon.